Good evening, everyone. I'm Ashley Melton, a program director at the Children's Council. We would like to thank you all for joining us for our fourth virtual Parent University tonight. Tonight, we continue our discussion around talking to our youth. The Children's Council will continue to host this series throughout the year. Whether you're watching us on Zoom or on Facebook Live, please take a minute and place your name in the comment section so we know who all is joining us tonight. Also, at the end of the webinar, there will be a link for you to complete a survey for a free gift card. Now I'd like to turn it over to Miranda Langley.
Thanks, Ashley. Welcome, everyone. We are excited about our virtual Parent University tonight. Tonight, we are continuing with our conversation around Let's Talk. I am Miranda Langley, Adolescent Program Director from the Children's Council. And then we have LaNisha Blair from Counseling Services. She's the Prevention Director. And then we also have DeAsia Fisher from the University of South Carolina. And in a little while, I'll let them introduce themselves a little bit more. First up, so parenting, if you feel like you're going crazy, then you're doing it right. A lot of times as parents, we feel like we're going crazy and that we're not always doing this parenting thing right. Especially during the pandemic, I know I have personally felt very overwhelmed. However, it's also given us more time to spend with our family and our children, and that has opened up more opportunities for us to have conversations around different topics. October is National Let's Talk Month, and it's a time that we encourage parents and trusted adults to talk to their young people about prevention. Since the pandemic, a partner agency, Counseling Services, and the Children's Council have been working on an awareness campaign. And I'm going to let LaNisha tell us a little bit about that campaign.
Well, good evening, everyone. Like Miranda said, I'm LaNisha Blair, and I am the Prevention Director at Counseling Services. I've been there about 14 years, so I started off being a prevention specialist and coordinator, and now I've worked my way up to the director. So I've been in the schools working with kids to now supervising. So it has been a very rewarding job, and I will say it has also been a very overwhelming job. Now, one of the things that the pandemic has brought on is a lot of added stress, as Miranda talked about. And so we just thought that it was important to take this time to talk to not only your coworkers, your family, but also your children, because they are overwhelmed too. I know the Chromebooks can be very overwhelming, especially when technology does not work. Virtual school, whether it's homeschool versus just the stresses of COVID-19 in general. So when we started the campaign, Take This Time to Talk, it was because school was out. A lot of parents were working remotely. And it was just the perfect opportunity because everyone was home. And when you're home, I know you can get bogged down with screen time, being a wife, a mom. I mean, we get so carried away, but it's also time to talk to your children. So we wanted parents to talk about all of the youth risk behaviors like alcohol and drugs, teen pregnancy, because you did have their undivided attention. There was no sports. There was really nothing much that was going on, but having that family time. So it was a perfect time to capture their attention and have those difficult conversations. Now, Take This Time to Talk really started off as a youth program, but then as I spoke with Ashley Melton from the Children's Council, we decided to talk about the other social distancing. Now, even though the CDC gave all these guidelines for prevention of the coronavirus, social distancing was one to keep 6 feet away from each other so you did not spread the virus. And so I kind of thought about social distancing and things that happen in social settings. And so when you are when you are a parent of a teenager or a preteen or a young adult, I tried to put a spin on social distancing because a lot of risky youth behaviors happen in social settings, like their first drink, sometimes sex, sometimes bullying. All of those situations, all of those behaviors happen in social settings. And so we wanted to talk about the other social distancing, to talk to them, keep them 6 feet away from alcohol and drugs, because that's just what good prevention is. I mean, even though we talk about prevention with the coronavirus, the other social distancing is good prevention as well, because it talks about reducing the access to all of these drugs, and it talks about reducing the access to your youth. So that's some of the protective factors and risk factors that we have. Now, the next slide. Now, one of the things that we wanted to do was expand the lines of communication when you talking to your youth about risky behaviors, and we just wanted to give parents strategies, because sometimes parents are just as nervous as the children when it comes to having these conversations. You don't know how much to disclose, how much not to disclose. You want to be open and honest with them so they can be open and honest with you. But sometimes you don't want to give them permission to go out and do some of the things that you did or make some of the mistakes that you made when you were a teenager. So what we tried to do was just give people a guide and having those conversations about setting boundaries, making sure that they know what the boundaries are, and also making sure that they know what your rules are, because sometimes, and I know me as a parent, I get caught up in thinking that my kids know the rules without necessarily saying, okay, no, you can't do A, B, C, and D. And they don't think like we think. So just setting those boundaries, being direct and honest with them. That's one of the things that I can say. Don't really hide. I mean, you don't necessarily have to disclose everything that you did, but I think you are more relatable when you are open to them. And this third one, this is something that I am guilty of, and my daughter will tell you, is giving praise. That's something that I had to learn from experience to do, because she would always tell me, you always talk about the bad stuff I do. You never talk about the good stuff I do. And that is true. And even though, I mean, she's going to introduce herself a little bit later, even though she's 20 years old, I still struggle with that today. And all in all, she is a good kid. And I do have to give her praise. And I try to consciously make that a decision to do that a lot more than I used to. Do the research. That's one thing. Doing the research, that's another thing that we've had several conversations is, she would tell me, you think you know everything. You think you know everything. That's the problem. Nobody can tell you anything. But I will say, I try to present them with research, and even with, as long as research, the legal consequences as well as the lifelong consequences. All of that goes hand in hand, because sometimes we know that the youth mind is not fully developed until the age of 25. So sometimes the research and the consequences are something that they can't fathom, because that part of their brain isn't fully developed yet. And one of the other things, this is make one-on-one time. I have a 20-year-old and I have a 5-year-old. And sometimes it's really hard to make one-on-one time with her, because he requires so much attention. That's the easiest way that I can put it. But you have to make that decision, because sometimes they may be going through things. And I know COVID has a lot of people stressed out about a lot of different things, but you have to make that one-on-one time. So I take my son to my sisters or my mom's, and we just have a girl day, because I always have one-on-one time with him. Like, it's just me and him now, but it's just making that conscious decision to talk to them. And one of the things is, I really ask her, I'm like, where's your head? Where's your head at? I ask her that all the time, just to kind of see what she's thinking about, what she has going on, so we can address it. Now, and even though I created this graphic, and even though I know the research is kind of hard when it's you and your child, so the keep calm is something that to this day I am still working on, but I do try to keep calm and try to listen for a, not listen to reply, listen to what she's actually saying. So sometimes it's hard to keep calm, especially when you know that they know better, and you know that you've had these conversations before. But I have to remember that we all make mistakes. I'm 38 and I still make mistakes. So that's one of the things that I try to keep calm. But I'm telling you, sometimes that's a lot harder said than done. And also connect with others. I will say, I have, well, I'm not going to say I'm going to say we have a great support system. And she will tell you that even if she can't talk to me, she has family members of mine that she can talk to. She can talk to my mom, my sister. She has friends of mine that she can talk to. And I also have to talk to them because I know I don't get everything right. And sometimes I struggle with keeping calm and making that one-on-one time. And so I have to connect with other people to keep me sane because there's no manual to being a parent. And that's one of the things that when I had her, I was 18. So we literally grew up together. And so that's just some of the strategies when you're talking to them about risky behaviors. Don't make it seem like you're perfect and didn't make mistakes, because that allows you to grow and that allows them to be able to know, okay, well, you did this, that, and the third, but also use those times as teachable moments. Because even though I did A, B, C, and D, I was a teen mom. That's something that I didn't wish for my child. And thank God we've made it to 20. And I hope we make it a lot longer because that's just some of the things that I didn't want her to have to struggle. And as a parent, I know we want kids to have a better life than we had. And so talking to them about your mistakes and talking to them about their future is very important. And that's one of the reasons why I created Take This Time to Talk, even with their academics. I remember at a training, and I know everybody remembers the drug prevention program, Just Say No, but they flipped it and said, just say yes. So when you're talking to your kids about whether it's alcohol or drugs, bullying, sex, teen violence, any of that, just say yes to all of the things that you want in life instead of no to the things that you don't want in life. Like DeAsia, this is the first year she hasn't played sports since 7th grade. And I wanted her to realize that even when you were growing up, it was some things that you could have done that could have put that in jeopardy. So don't say no to, no, I don't want to go to jail. Nobody wants to go to jail. No, nobody wants to struggle. But say, yes, I want to graduate college debt free. And so do everything that you have to do in order to achieve those positive goals instead of deterring them with those negative goals. So, which leads me to my next slide about protective and risk factors. Now, protective factors are things that allows a child to thrive and a child to reach those goals like we were talking about. And risk factors are things that can deter them. And right here I have a list of protective and risk factors and what that domain is. And that domain is how you can have an intervention at that level to either increase the protective factors or decrease the risk factors. Now when you're talking about like, I'll go to the second one, for instance, because this is Parent University, and lack of parental supervision. Now, lack of parental supervision is definitely a risk factor because we know that when kids are not supervised, they can get in a whole world of trouble. Sometimes I know that I can't leave my 20-year-old unsupervised, like I can't leave my 5-year-old unsupervised. And that all goes with the risk factors. Her risks are a lot greater than his at 5. But I also know that as a parent, in order for me to increase their protective factors and let them have the outcome that they want, I have to have that parental monitoring. Now, I can honestly say that's one of the biggest issues that we've had is monitoring. And I think now that she has grown a little bit older, like we don't have closed doors in the house unless everybody's going to sleep. That's just that monitoring. It was a point where I was checking her cell phone. I don't do that nearly as much now because I have so much stuff of my own going on, but it comes with a level of trust. And I think that's one of the biggest things that parents have to realize. But I also, on the flip side, I also think kids need to realize that trust has to be earned. It can't just be given. And so if you don't want your parents monitoring your things or going through your phone, then you have to step up and be able to do everything that you need to do in order for them to trust you and not have to do that. Also, the next one is substance abuse. One of the things that we do at counseling services is we go into the schools and we teach about substance abuse, peer pressure, and different things like that, because we know that sometimes like I said, a lot of those risky youth behaviors happen in social settings, and those social settings, kids are around their peers. So as a parent, it's not only do you have to monitor your kid, it's true that you have to monitor their friends as well, because you never know what the situation may lead to. And all in all, the children are our future. And I know it sounds really cliche, but as parents, I mean, it really takes a village to raise kids, even more so now than it used to, because there's so much that they have access to. And that access is one of the things that, as a coalition and as an agency, we are trying to reduce. But we can't do it all on our own. Like we also talked about, there's different school things that schools do. Lancaster County School District has a very good anti-drug policy. Also, there's things in the community. When I think about the community, one of the areas that come into mind is Beaufort. And I know Miranda's from Beaufort and Ashley's from Beaufort, but Beaufort is one community that is the epitome of strong neighborhood attachment. My coworker Terry Lee is from Beaufort, and they have a sense of community like I've never seen anywhere else. They take care of their own. It's just one of those things where a neighborhood where they have strong community attachment. And I do admire that. And I think that that has to happen all over Lancaster County. Because if you look at Indian Land is a place where a lot of people just migrated to, and they're going to work in Charlotte, and they don't really have the connection like people in Beaufort do. And that connection is a protective factor. And that connection is something that we try to help people with, and we try to help our community with, because all in all, we know that that connection is what helps these children. So the risk factors and the protective factors, even though it sounds very technical, it really isn't. It's just stuff that we do all the time, like the monitoring, like focusing on grades, like policies, the self-control. That's one of the things that is very hard to teach a 5-year-old, is self-control, because no, you can't have candy before you have dinner, but that's one of the things that he has to learn on his own. And that's one of the things that I can say D has learned, is that self-control about everything may be, oh, instant gratification now, but it'll be a lot sweeter a little bit later. So when we talk about protective factors, I will say, D, you can chime in any minute, but when talking to her allows me to be a better parent to my son, and having an open line of communication. And I'm not going to say it's wide open, because it's still some things that we don't talk about, but I think all in all, she realizes that I'm not her enemy, and I do want the best for her. And it may not come across that way, because as a parent, we are so invested in our kids. And I like to use this analogy when I'm talking to her and Britain. It's like, if you see Britain headed headed to the road, and there's traffic coming, what are you gonna do? And she said, I'm gonna stop him. And I said, why? And she was like, because I don't want him to get hurt. And I said, and I'm doing the same thing with you. She always tells me, oh, Mama, you're such a good parent with him. You have so much patience. But if it had not been for her, I wouldn't have that patience. And so she can talk a little bit about our relationship, because I'm not a perfect mom, and I know she's not a perfect daughter, but I think we just are invested in each other to work through some of those hard issues. And so, D, you can chime in.
Good evening, everybody. I'm DeAsia Fisher. I'm LaNisha Blair's daughter. And I would say me and my mom, we do have a good relationship. I feel like it definitely we have definitely gotten closer since I've been in college, for sure. It is very true that they say once you get older, your parents become your best friend. That is a true statement, because I literally go to my mom about everything. That's like my best friend.
And I'm a parent, and I will say, rewind 2 years ago, I would never have thought I would hear that come out of her mouth, because we bumped heads a lot, but I think that college experience and being on her own has taught her a lot. And even her telling me that I'm judgmental. D, you want to talk about how you always say I'm judgmental? And
Oh yeah, sometimes I feel like my mom can be judgmental. You can ask her one thing and then like she just go off and like just start talking about all this other stuff. I'm like, Ma, I just ask you one simple question. It's okay. Like I got it. Like I'm learning, I'm growing. But yeah, my mom she can be judgmental sometimes, but like she thinks she know everything too, but it's just something you gotta deal with once you're like the kid. So yeah.
yeah. So Miranda, you can the next slide.
And the next slide might kind of jog some memories of some conversations maybe you've had. I saw this and I thought it was a really good meme, a teenager post. I asked my parents a simple yes or no question and I get a lecture. A few helpful tips when talking to your youth. Try not to lecture. Listen to what they are asking you or telling you and give them a chance to explain why they are bringing up the topic. Then try to answer their questions or concerns without getting mad or jumping to conclusions. Is there a time that maybe, DeAsia, you remember, you kind of just talked a little bit about this, but maybe a certain time where you asked your mom like a yes or no question and she just kind of like laid into you? Or LaNisha, is there some tips for parents that maybe when they get these questions that maybe are like, why are you asking me this? Like maybe it be about drugs or alcohol, or maybe it be about sex, and just how to stay calm and answer these questions or give them the best advice or information you can.
Um, I will honestly say that D probably don't remember one time because it's all the time when I just lay into a lecture. But I don't think that one of the things that I have learned is if she comes and asks me something off the wall, I know that she's asking for a reason.
Yeah.
And I know that will you agree with that?
I agree with that.
And I know that her mind is turning. So it's either, and I will honestly say, this is something that I had to learn from experience. It was either I can go off and be like, what are you thinking about that for? Or I can actually humble myself and say, this is a teachable moment. I need to learn why she's thinking the way that she's thinking or what her train of thought is, because if I don't and she gets information somewhere else, it could potentially put her in a dangerous situation. So that's one of the things that, and I will be guilty of the lecture and I'm like, sit down, let's talk. And it's like, oh boy. And her favorite thing is forget it. And when I get ready to lay into a lecture, it's like, never mind, just forget it. I don't want to go. I don't want to do nothing. It's just, it turns her completely off until it was like, I had to say, okay, I'm not helping her. I'm pushing her away. Because when she shuts down, then both of us calm down and I go in the room and lay in the bed with her. I'm like, what's wrong? She was like, never mind. I don't want to talk about it anymore. So I, with my attitude and my ego, just ruined a moment that I could have had to bring us closer. And I have done that several times. I'll be the first to admit that. But I had to learn that she's dealing with things too. And when she's asking me something or researching something crazy off the wall, that's just my opportunity to put my feelings aside and have a conversation with her to get to know where her head at. But I would say, D, it took us a while to get there, right?
Yeah, I agree.
It took us a while. I mean, even up until maybe I would say about last year, she would ask me something, I mean, just crazy. I remember one time she was like, Mama, how long does cocaine stay in your system?
I do remember that.
And as a parent and doing prevention 14 years, of course, my mind goes to the very extreme instead of saying, why do you want to know? Or why, I mean, why does that intrigue you and stuff like that? So I know that if I had just went to 100, I would have lost that moment to have that conversation with her. But it comes with experience, because there's times where I completely ruin opportunities. And as a teenager, when you're ready as a parent to talk to them, they're on to the next thing and don't even want to talk about it anymore. So
DeAsia, can I is there any tips that maybe you can give our teens or our youth on how to approach your parents with difficult questions, or just these yes no questions that maybe, like she said, you was curious about the length cocaine stays in your system, and in your mind you were just thinking like this is going to be like a simple XYZ is how long it is, and then it turned into something more. Is there anything that you can tell our teens or our young adults on how to talk to their parents about these topics or these situations that maybe come up that you want those answers to, but maybe you are a little nervous about asking those questions?
I'd probably say don't be scared to talk to your parents, because like I never really talked to my mom till I got older about like certain things. But like you actually find out your parents are like actually kind of cool. Like they're not as bad as you think they are. So I just say like don't be afraid to ask questions, because like you never know like what could happen, and like they might just like give you an answer or they could go off. But either way, it's a learning experience and it's a part of growing up. So
Sounds like it's a learning experience from both sides, from the parent
yes.
side and the youth or young adult side. This next one I thought was kind of funny. I want to meet the teenage version of my parents. We also need to remember that us as adults were one-time teenagers. I mean, we did some of these silly, crazy things. We asked those silly, crazy questions, or at least thought about those silly, crazy questions. So we know what it's like. And even though times have changed and our youth are experiencing many things that maybe we didn't as teenagers, it's important to talk to them about family values and your beliefs. This gives them an idea of what is somewhat expected of them. And LaNisha, you kind of talked early about telling them the rules, because a lot of times as parents, we kind of expect them to know the rules.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of talk a little bit about that, like family values and beliefs and family rules that maybe sometimes us as parents think our kids know or should know, and we just expect them to know that. Talk about how you kind of let DeAsia know that, and even your son at 5. Talk about how you kind of let them know those rules and expectations.
Well, I would say, and she's probably gonna kill me when I say this, but one of the biggest things that was, I would say one of the hardest conversations to have with her was about sex, because I had her when I was 18, but yet as a parent, I'm telling her, wait till you're married, wait till you're married. And that was just a difficult conversation to have, because she knows that me and her daddy were not married. So that was one of the things where you have to just admit some of the mistakes that you've made. Not to say that she's a mistake, but just that just comes to play in where your morals are. And even though this happened to me, I want better for you. And that's one of the things that was very hard, because thank God my mom is not on this live, but the teenage version of me was a little bit worse than a teenage version of DeAsia, honestly. But I will say that it like everything that we've been talking about, it is a learning experience. And I know that like right now, even having her to understand what our morals and our values is, even though my life may didn't follow those morals and values at one point in time, like talking about waiting till you're married and things like that. It's just letting her know that it is for her good. I was working 3 jobs and going to Winthrop and had a newborn. And that's totally not the life that I wanted for her, even though it made me who I am today. And even though I had an amazing support system, I still know that it was days where I just wanted to give up. and I wanted it to be as easy for her, and a certain extent. I wanted life to be easier for her because a lot of that could have been avoidable.
Mhm.
And at that time, I didn't necessarily know that, but I knew it. Like my mama never really had that conversation with me about it, but it was just, they said it was just understood. It doesn't need to be explained. That was one of the things that was like, okay, I'm not gonna tell you, you know better. That was, and that's probably still one of my favorite lines. You know better. But as a parent, how do they know better? Are we telling them better? Are we giving them options? Are we giving them our morals and our values? That's something that I can't say I was doing. I was just saying, you know better, but I wasn't giving her the tools that she needed to actually know better. So, like when me and one of my friends get together and talk about some of the old me growing up days, she just sits there and listens like this. Like she was like, Mom, I just love when Miss Kayla comes because I hear all the stuff that y'all did. And I'm like, yeah, but I, as a parent, I made some very, very, very risky decisions. And I think that the fear of the risky decisions that I made drives me to be the parent that I am to her, because it was a lot of situations where to this day at 38, my mama doesn't know about, but I just want to have that conversation, that communication with her, because I know that even though it didn't take a turn for the worse, it easily could have. And so she tells me all the time she wants to meet the teenage version of me, and she wants the shoot around with me, but I don't think she really wants to. It's just a joke that we have. But I just want her to realize that everything that I do, it is a purpose behind it. Because I mean, my mom stayed on me, but my mom had 3 other kids. And so with it just being me and her growing up together, I was guilty of, like I said, I was guilty of expecting her to know the rules, expecting her to know our morals and our values without necessarily sitting down and teaching her and having that conversation with her. Like she grew up in church, she knew right from wrong, but it wasn't around 7th grade. That's when I like to tell people she started to lose her mind, because I just expected her to know and not necessarily giving her an outlet to talk to me about what she had going on. I was like, you know better. And I remember saying that just about every day when she was in the 7th grade, but I really wasn't giving her the tools to know better, to actually do better. So it was just one of those learning experiences. Again, we've had a lot of those. Would you agree, like 7th grade? And
Yes, I agree. I did start showing out, hanging out with the wrong crowd in 7th grade. And yeah, my mom was on me a lot then.
yeah. And that's when that helicopter parent come into play, because I was sitting emailing teachers and she was like, oh my God. But
Yeah, I had that parent, the one that even the teachers, check power school, all that. I had that
yeah,
parent.
she did and still does sometimes.
I'm glad you brought that up. And not necessarily the helicopter parent, but you mentioned earlier about checking like their phones and checking in on them, monitoring them, their social media accounts, things like that. From a teenager standpoint, DeAsia, how did you feel about that? As far as like, did it make you, looking back on it now, I guess a little bit, I know you're not that much older, but looking back on it now, do you understand why, and how do you feel about that, and what would you tell teenagers whose parents do that?
I feel like it honestly helped me out in the long run, because like I see other like teens my age who like have kids, or like just not like the life that I visioned for myself. And like I know if it wasn't for my mom that like I would probably be in that same situation. So like with her like checking my phones, like one of my location, all that, like I mean, it's a part, like, it's just a part of life. You're just gonna have to go through it if you want to earn that trust. Like, it's just what you're gonna have to do to get that trust. It's gonna make you like a better person in the end. Like, you might not like it, because I know back then I didn't, like, I hated it. Especially like, because my friends, like, none of their parents was really doing any of that. And like, here's my mom, like, oh, let me see your phone. Oh, you got a bedtime, this and that. So yeah. But it honestly helped me out in the long run, because like now I'm in college and I don't really go out. Like, I'm just a homebody, and I have to thank her for that.
I actually encourage her to go out because I do want her to experience life. I just want her to do it safely and responsibly. And I think that's one of the things that she probably understands a little bit now, but at like she didn't. She just thought that she was missing something. And now that she has the opportunity to do what she wants to do and not really have to, check in with mom, she's like, Mama, what you doing? And I'm like, nothing, D. I thought she was going to bed. Just kind of stuff like that. So when she does get the opportunities to do those things, she is really not the height that it's made up to be. And that's one of the things that I tried to teach her. I mean, you can live fast, but at some point that car is going to stop. So I just wanted her to just kind of pace herself, because you don't have to do everything that everybody else is doing. And I was that parent, and I was that parent with her friends too. They will tell you too that I would be texting their moms. But I will say, like, as she got older, sometimes I would, if something seemed out of the ordinary for me, that's when I would start checking her social media. I remember I deleted her Facebook and changed her account one time because she wasn't handling it responsibly. And she was like, I'm trying to log into my Facebook, but I don't even remember my password. And I was like, oh, try this. And she was like, it worked. And I was like, yeah, because I changed it. And it was just things like that I mean, and I think that even at that age, and looking back on it now, even though it seemed normal to her and it seemed normal to her friends, in actuality, it was really a privilege, because a lot of people think that social media is normal, but having a cell phone is normal. But it's really a privilege, and a privilege you have to have responsibility with that. And so that's what I was trying to teach her now. And I can say that after the fact because it makes more sense now instead of going through it. So just having that responsibility with it, because it is a privilege.
It is. And LaNisha, you and I grew up around the same time. And I mean, we didn't have some of these things that our teenagers have today. Cell phones. I mean, we had cell phones, but you didn't use them, but just for emergencies. Social
Exactly.
media wasn't really a thing. So talk to parents who maybe are our age and older that didn't have those things, and talk about a little bit why it's important to check, their cell phones and check their social media accounts and kind of monitor those things.
I think one of the biggest things is because times are different. And when you have social media and when you have access to the World Wide Web, anything can happen. You have people that are preying on you, preying on little kids. You have people that are taking advantage. I mean, credit card scams, even as adults. So you can imagine a teenager not being able to maneuver that world. And it's just really one of the things that has changed the most between my generation and her generation is, I mean, I remember you couldn't even talk on the phone and be on the internet at the same time. And now you can have your phone on speakerphone and searching the web at the same time. So I think even though it gives me a greater appreciation for technology, and technology is great when it works, but it also has that dark side that people prey on you. And you have, as a parent, I mean, even if I would, stranger danger, I would protect her from a stranger coming into our personal space. So with the internet, it's the same thing. It's just you're taking away that physicality of it. They can still prey on you. They can still hack your accounts. They can still steal your pictures, things like that, even though it's not physical like we were taught growing up. We were stranger danger, don't get in the cars with people you don't know. Now we get in the Ubers all the time. And it was like everything that we were taught growing up, that's just normal for them.
Right.
And so I think as a parent, because I grew up in a time where it was stranger danger and don't get in the car with people you don't know, things like that, I'm just very cautious about leaving her in those situations. Like even with Facebook, I'm like, don't accept people you don't know. Snapchat, don't accept people you don't know. And because you just never know what people's intentions are. And though even though technology was meant and is a great thing, it just has that dark side that people prey on. And as parents, it is our job, just as like I was talking about that run into a crowded road. It's our job to protect them then, and it's still our job to protect them when it's the internet. So I do. Well, I did. I don't anymore. I don't check phones, and that's one of the things where research is now telling us the importance of screen time and how we need to decrease our screen time, because we didn't have that research. Like technology just hit us like this, and so now that we have the research behind it, some of the things that I did with her, I don't necessarily do with my son, like the technology. I think she was in the third grade when she had a phone, and just different things like that. I just won't make those same, I don't want to say mistakes, but I won't make those same choices again, because they're just more at risk now than they would be at even when she was 5 or even when I was 5. So times have just changed. And as a parent, you have to adapt to those times. And one of the things that she tells me all the time is about my son is make him responsible. We talked about this last week. What were you saying?
Yes, I said, make him responsible earlier so he won't end up like me.
And what does that mean? Because people don't know what that means.
Well, that just means like just teach a responsibility early, because I wasn't really held accountable for my actions growing up. So like then I hit the real world and it's just like boom, like you just gotta learn all this stuff at once. But I feel like if I would have like started doing it earlier, then it would have been easier to get along with.
Good thought.
And that's one thing that I learned from experience. So I'm trying to hold him accountable and make him more responsible as a suggestion to her, because I mean, she can't handle a crisis, but let me say, I can't either, because I'm the first one to call my mom on the phone too. So
Well, I'm glad y'all brought up your 5-year-old. So, how is parenting or conversations different with him? And I know we talk to parents a lot about age appropriateness, starting the conversation early, young. It's not just a one and done conversation. You have those conversations ongoing. With him being younger, how do you encourage parents to start those conversations around drugs and alcohol, and even sex, as far as not necessarily sex, but good touch, bad touch, things like that? And as they age, how do you what's some advice you can give to parents who have younger kids and they're wanting to start these conversations?
I would say make the conversation age appropriate. Dee and I were on the phone yesterday joking about candy being Britain's drug, because that's all he wants. That's all he wants. So, and I just use that as a way to talk to him about things that are good for you and things that are bad for you, because he knows that if he eats a lot of candy, it makes his tummy hurt. Or as he said, it makes his tummy twist. And so when his tummy twists, I have to say, you can't eat candy. That's one of the consequences of doing this. Too much of anything will make your tummy hurt, even candy, even chips, different things like that. So on that age appropriate level, like I remember reading a paper on crayons. Yeah, son, you can eat the crayons, but it's going to make your tummy hurt and it's going to have all these consequences afterwards. And so that's the kind of same thing with talking about drugs and talking about poisons and different things like that. About it will make your tummy hurt, or it will make your waist green, or whatever color you eat the crayon. So that is something that they can't necessarily see the consequences of it. But as a parent, if you tell them, oh no, you can't do this, or this will make you sleepy, or this will make you tired, that will give them a way to understand that everything that mommy gives me, or whether it's like medicine, because you can't just go and our big thing is vitamins. He wants to eat all of the vitamins because they're gummies, and he thinks that they're fruit snacks. But it's no, son, you can't have all these gummies because they have medicine in them to help your body. And if you have too much of that medicine, it will make your tummy twist. And that's kind of how I talk to him about good things and bad things. And even him leaving a yogurt out, and he was like, mommy, is this any good? And I'm like, no, that'll make your tummy hurt, and different things like that. So you can just further that conversation along with them about alcohol and drugs the older they get. Like if it's cough medicine, and he loves the bubblegum medicine, but he also has to realize that the bubblegum medicine is a drug, and you can't have it all the time because the doctor says you can only have it at this time and this time because it'll make you sicker. And so that's kind of how I have the conversations with him. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. So it's just, you have to know your kid. And that's one thing that I will say, when you are having these conversations, know your kids and know how they respond to things, because he loves candy, but you have some kids that love vegetables, and they can just flip it and do it the same way. So just knowing your kid and just knowing how to talk to them and what's age appropriate, even like with screen time, sex, different things like that. Don't, and I'll tell you, this is just a joke that we had earlier this week, because boys will be boys, and he calls his private his wee wee, and I was like, I'm sick of you saying wee wee. And he looked at me and he said, well, wee is one of my sight words this week. So I'm like, you know what I mean, just situations like that. When, even though we've been having that conversation and we've been talking to him about things that you can say, things that people can do, and nobody is supposed to do this but mommy. And it kind of got us into a really like sticky situation when he's with D, because I'm like, nobody can touch you but mommy and daddy. And then when he goes to Columbia and stays with her the weekend, it's like, mama, tell him that I'm supposed to watch him, just stuff like that. So you just have to have that conversation where they can understand it and where it's appropriate for them. So.
All right. Okay, so just thinking back, Power to Decide is the national campaign to prevent teen pregnancy. And when we talk about, that the most important person to have these conversations with our youth or our young people are parents. This is what our young people are saying, who they want this information from. So from 12 to 15, parents are still up there. They're 52%. Teens 16 to 19, 32%. Now, as they get older, of course, that's going to change a little bit. From 20 to 21, it moves up to friends. Friends they get their influence from friends on decisions about sex. And then same thing with 22 to 24 is still friends. So, when thinking about these conversations that you're having with your kids, even other than just conversations about sex, they're wanting to hear that information from their parents. They're wanting their parents to give them this information. So, DeAsia, as a young adult, do you agree with this? What kids are saying, what the age ranges are saying, that, yeah, parents are the most influential. And then as you get older, it changes a little bit more to your friends. And what would you say to parents about having those discussions with their teens?
I think it's pretty accurate. Because once you hit a certain age, you just like don't really, you kind of disregard what your parents say. You think you know everything. I know I went through that phase already. I thought I knew everything, but yeah, I think it is pretty accurate for the most part. And what I would say to parents talking to their teens about sex, I honestly just say don't be afraid to talk, because like your kids are probably just as nervous or scared as you are. So I feel like the sooner you have the conversation, the easier it'll be, or like the smoother it will be. So I know like some parents are like timid or like kind of afraid, like, nah, maybe I should wait. But I feel like the longer you wait, then they're gonna hear it from someone else or like their friends. So it is best to just start talking to them early about those issues.
Right. And, you know, parents, we don't know everything, and we don't need to pretend that we do. If there is something that we don't know the answer to, there's always the internet. There's always friends who are, you know, who've had these conversations that maybe could give you some helpful pointers or tips. You know, just from preventions people. LaNisha is counseling services can give parents tips on how to talk to their kids
Right.
about drugs and alcohol. You know, doctors' offices can give that medical accurate information. And, you know, letting our kids know that we don't know all the answers kind of, it makes us more human. And it, I mean, DeAsia, do you agree? I mean, it makes us look like, oh, they really don't know everything. Like that, you know,
Kind of a relief for us.
right,
Mhm.
right. Um, and I mean, you know, we're just as nervous and confused about having these conversations with the teens as the teens are about coming to their parents to ask them those conversations. Because I know my parents did not talk to me about that kind of stuff. I mean, it just at that time, I don't think, you know, that was just something we had conversations about. And
Mhm.
like LaNisha said earlier, I think it's just one of those things it's just assumed that you're supposed to know better. Um, so we can't always assume that our kids know what we're thinking or what we mean.
Right.
Any thoughts on that? Anything you want to
No,
add?
I completely agree. And I know we talk a lot about teen pregnancy, but when you're having those conversations about sex, also make sure you also include sexually transmitted infections and sexually transmitted diseases, because I can honestly say growing up, that was nothing that we ever talked about. It was just don't get pregnant. You better not get pregnant. But it was so much other
Right.
consequences of that action. So it was just one of those things that I do want to say, don't just make pregnancy the biggest deterrent when you're talking about sex. Just make sure you are very inclusive about all of the consequences that can happen.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. Um, DeAsia, any thoughts on conversating with your young people?
um don't listen to your friends, because 9 times out of 10 they don't know what they're talking about. If you have a question, I say go to a parent or someone that you trust. The internet is not always correct also. So, but especially don't listen to your friends, because like they have the most influence on you around this age, but like they probably don't know themselves. So I say just go to someone you trust or a parent.
Yeah, and like you said, you know, the internet isn't always
Mhm.
right. A lot of times our young people will just Google something and
Mhm.
Google will bring up anything and everything. If you're going to Google information, it definitely needs to be from a reliable source, whether it be the CDC. And the CDC has information ranging from sex, drugs, alcohol,
Mhm.
coronavirus. I mean, anything, and it's all medically accurate information. There's other sites that you can go to. Anything that has .org or .gov behind it is usually a pretty reputable site. So just making sure that, you know, if you're searching the internet for these answers or these wanting these to ask these questions to somebody and you don't feel comfortable asking it to an adult, you know, just make sure that you're looking at sites that have good information, factual information. All right.
And
So
text. That's one thing that I've tried to tell her. If you can't talk to me about it, text me.
yeah. And you know, a lot of teenagers have phones, these cell phones. So texting is sometimes easier, or writing it out. I mean, I know a lot of people that write anymore, but like an email, a text message, like sometimes it is hard to have those face-to-face conversations, awkward conversations. So, I mean, I could certainly see it being much easier to talk through a text instead of sitting there in that awkward, not knowing what to say kind of moment.
Yeah. Give you time to Google it before you respond.
Right. Yeah. You got a minute to think like, okay, how am I going to answer this? And then they can't see you sweating, because a lot of times we're sweating. So we just saw on that last slide that our teens want to hear this information from us, from the parents or a trusted adult. But the problem is only 1 in 4 teens report that that their parents are having these conversations with them. What's some helpful information, some tips, some pointers we can give our parents to just sit down and have these conversations and start it small, start it with something simple. Talk about some like teachable moments, LaNisha. Like, what are some things that you raising DeAsia kind of used as teachable moments?
I would say some of the most valuable teachable moments came when she tried to initiate conversations with me, not necessarily me trying to initiate conversations with her, because I was one of those parents that thought, oh, well, I got time. Well, I got time. Well, I got time. And then it was like, oh crap, I don't have time, you know, and it was her out of curiosity trying to come to me and me like, wait, why are you thinking about that? Or wait, what's going on? Those were some of the greatest teachable moments for me, because it was like, I can either be the force behind what's pushing her to do something right, or I can leave her to wonder and figure it out on her own. And there was times where I can say that I probably left her wondering and how to figure things out. But thank God that she has a very great support system as well, because I know it was times where she wouldn't come to me and she would go to my sister. And I'm like, why are you talking to her and not me? Not realizing that she tried and I was the one that pushed that conversation away. So I would just say, be, like I said, when you know your child, be open to what they have going on. Cause I was guilty of thinking that, oh, you 13, you ain't got nothing to be stressed about, but they do. And as a parent, it is our job to guide them. It is our job to acknowledge their feelings. It is our job to help them acknowledge their feelings themselves. Because I know that sometimes it's easier for her to just shoot me a text and pick up the phone and call me. And sometimes I'm the reason for that barrier, because I can be judgmental. I'm like, and I know she won't answer the phone. If I'm calling, like, what is this and what's going on? And she's like, I'm not even finna deal with that. And so I'm sitting here like, and it gives me a moment to calm down and really see what it is. So I can honestly say a lot of my teachable moments came from her and acknowledging her feelings and being able to have those conversations and like, oh gosh, I don't know what to do next. I mean, having those conversations with my mom, having those conversations with Donna when I was at work, she would just send me a text. I'm like, oh God, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do. But I know that I don't have to know it all. And I think that's one of the things that she has learned is like, sometimes I'm like, baby, I don't know. You'll figure it out. We'll figure it out together. And I think that probably gives her a lot more relief than saying, oh no, you need to do A, B, C, and D if you want A, B, C, and D. And that's not necessarily the case. And I remember, and I know we are getting closer to time, but we had a really, really big, I'm not going to say discussion, but we had a really big disagreement about college because she was like, I don't want to go to college. I just want to study a trade or go to a technical school or just do something. I'm like, no, you're getting a degree. And she was like, but mama, she was prepared because she knows me. You remember that conversation? She came at me with A, B, C, and D about you can make more money doing this, and this. And I was like, no, you're getting a degree. You're getting a degree. And that was me not listening to her. But I can honestly say that now she is at a place where she values education and realize that even though not to demean any trade or anything of that nature, it was just I wasn't listening to her, and it was how I was raised. I mean, my mom has 5 degrees, but it was like that was drilled into me, and so I was drilling it into her. But they live in a time now where that's not necessarily the case. And that was one of the really, I think probably 11th grade, that was one of the really big disagreements that we had. But it was, I had to listen to her and understand her point of view. And it taught me that, okay, maybe sometimes a trade is more important, or it depends on what the trade is. So yeah, we went round for round about that one. I was soliciting help and she was soliciting help, and it was just finally I was like, you know what? You got to figure it out. I've lived my life. It's your turn. So it was just not really giving up, but just letting her realize that, you know, you do have a point. I have a point, you have a point, and it doesn't mean we're going to necessarily agree, but we really just had to. I still don't even think we got to the bottom of that argument or that disagreement. But I mean, she came with her research because she knows that it's hard to change my mind. And she was like, no, mama, you can do this, you can do that. And it was just one of those conversations that I wasn't prepared for. And she got me to the point where I had to be more open-minded. And I will say that's one of the things that I was very close-minded. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes, yes, your way or the no way. Once you have your mind made up, there's no changing it. No need to ask.
I didn't say all that. I said closed-minded. I was very closed-minded, and she opened my eyes up to a lot more about, even though I'm not getting there the way that you suggest that I get there, I'm still reaching the destination. And so that kind of helped me, like, okay, so but I think we'll probably have that conversation tonight after this Zoom is over, after this Facebook Live is over with. But that's one of the things that I can say. She has really taught me to be a lot more open-minded to things and to be not so closed-minded and not so judgmental about certain situations. So
one more question and then we'll see what our viewers have for you guys. But just thinking about, we're encouraging our parents, our trusted adults, to have these conversations with their youth, their young people. You know, sometimes we hear like, well, I don't want to have that conversation because I'm scared it will push them to do X, Y, and Z. Or if I'm talking to them about it, they're thinking I'm encouraging it, or I'm giving them okay to do it. I'd kind of like to hear from both of y'all how y'all feel about that, and what you would say to parents that maybe have that mindset that I'm scared if I talk to them about sex or drugs or alcohol, or I let them know how I was as a teenager, that might encourage them to do those things.
well, I think that when you talk about it, you have to be honest, and you don't have to glorify it. You can say, yeah, I did this, but listen, I went through this and I went through that, and that's not what I want for you. And so just being really open about that conversation and being honest with them about, look, yeah, I made mistakes and I don't want you to make those same mistakes. I always tell D, I want you to be better than me. I want you to do A, B, C, and D a lot better than I did. But I don't think it necessarily gives them permission if you have the full conversation. Just saying, I mean, if you as a parent are thinking about it, 9 times out of 10, they've already, as a child, thought about it.
Mhm.
So I just think just being honest with them, having that conversation. They will tell you when it came to puberty and stuff, I was like, nope, can't talk about it because I wasn't ready. And I didn't want her to think, okay, well, that means she can go do this, and that means she can go do that. And I think probably the same with and this is not our story, but the same with parents and birth control. You know, you put kids on birth control trying to prevent some of the negative consequences that can happen. And some kids think, oh, well, I can't get pregnant, so I can just do what I want to do. But I think it comes from having an entire conversation, not just an action behind it. You have to explain to them why you're having that action or why you're doing the things that you do so they can get the entire picture and it not be one-sided, because sometimes as a kid, they can manipulate the situation for their gain. But as a parent, you have to make sure, one, that you're on top of situations like that. And for two, that you're giving them reasons why. Look, I'm not putting you on this because of A, B, and C, you know, just because, I mean, some people, it regulates their sight, different things like that. But I don't want you to think that this is saying, okay, it's a free fall. You can go do whatever you want to. But you have to have that conversation. And I think a lot of people don't necessarily want to get into the whys of what they're doing. And that leaves kids thinking, and that leaves that gray area for them to make the decisions on their own. So it doesn't necessarily give them permission. It validates that it does happen, for one, but it also teaches them that I want you to be better. I know that things happen, mistakes happen, things happen all the time, but I'm not putting you on this as a means to go do it. I'm putting it on you as a way to prevent certain outcomes. And I think just having that whole entire conversation, not just the one time, but constantly. So
I agree. I think the whys are important too, just as much as having the conversation is important to tell your like children why you're talking to them or like why you want to know this and that. I feel like that's very important.
it's probably something that I didn't do starting out. What'd you say?
No, but I mean, I understand like when you broke it down, yeah, that is important. Telling your kids why you want to have this conversation, like, oh, you're getting older. I need to have like this talk with you. Like, oh, you like getting to high school now. You about to be around a whole different crowd. Like, you're gonna experience different things. We need to have this talk or like that. I feel like that's how parents should approach their children, not versus just like, oh, you need to get on birth control, you need to do this and that, because then like of course they're going to think like you're giving them permission.
All right. Thank you, ladies. So we're going to turn it over to Ashley and see if we have any questions.
Okay, you do. You actually have a good bit of awesome questions. So the first question is for LaNisha and DeAsia. Why do you think your relationship has changed since you have gotten older?
I would say I have matured more. I starting to see things from my mom's perspective, so I understand why she like was on me back then, because like it helped me now. So I kind of just understand why I had to go through what I went through, because like now I feel like I'm like more mature. So I feel like that's how we have gotten closer, because I've become more understanding.
Mhm. And I would say the exact same. I mean, it just comes as a learning experience and with growth. So
Good. LaNisha, how do you stop yourself from giving your daughter lectures? Or do you?
body language. Her body language tells me when to stop, and her body language tells me like, okay, she needs to hear this. Because if I see if I see them eyes roll in the back of her head, I've lost her. But I know that I've just come to grow. I've just come to understand that those are moments where I can either bring her closer to me or push her away. And I know when she rolls them eyes in the back of her head, I am definitely pushing her away. And at this point, that's not something that I want to do because she doesn't live at home. And I just have to we just have to have that open line of communication. And I would regret if something was to happen and she couldn't talk to me because of me or her feeling like she didn't want to lecture. So it was just kind of a learning experience. And her body language is able to tell me that, okay, she's being receptive, or all right, just forget it, stop the conversation. So
Good. LaNisha, you mentioned checking phones and social media accounts. How would you react if you found something that you did not approve of?
that's probably more of a question for her. But when she was a lot younger, I would really that's when the lectures would come, that's when the punishment would come. But now I don't necessarily it's not really an issue now, but she knew it was okay. She would lose it. It would be like, it wasn't until she started driving that me taking her phone was no longer an option, because I hate for something to happen. So it was like, okay, you got to step up if you want this trust, but I also have to relinquish some of that control too, because if I saw something or I was like, I would screenshot and send it to myself, because I know by the time I would get to her and fuss it, she'd be done deleted it or it'd have been gone. But it was just things like that. It was like we both matured in that situation, but she knows that even to this day, we would have conversations about different stuff, like dating apps that I've saw on there, and I'm like, oh no, ma'am. She's older, but it's like I don't get to 100, but I get to about a 75. So especially I'm like, what is Tinder doing on here? Stuff like that. But
you have to expose me like that.
Well, I mean, it's a difference between then and now. And I mean, you sending crazy text messages then was one thing, but this is a totally different time. So I can't necessarily punish, or I can punish you, but I'm saying I can't necessarily take your phone now because you're not home. But that was a conversation that we had to have that conversation. So I don't know if that answered the question, but I hope I did.
It did. It definitely did. The next, a viewer put, this isn't a question, but more of a statement. It seems that technology has added extra stress to parenting. Checking phones and social media accounts and monitoring screen time have had to be added into the parenting category. But it seems that you are navigating these uncharted waters well.
Thank you.
Next questions for Asia. Do you think your mom was stricter on you because of the line of work that she was in? And do you think that you would have gotten away with more if she wasn't in that line of work?
I think that did play a part in it, but she was going to be strict regardless. But yes, where she works at definitely played a part in it. I know, like, sometimes I'll be in school and like I see her in the hallway, be like, what you doing here? And like she'll be like doing surveys or something. But like she's always been strict on me, like even to this day. So like, but I do think her job does play an effect on it, because she like knows more than what like an average parent would. She's more aware of issues that's going on.
Good. I completely agree with that. I definitely think so. LaNisha, what was the most valuable lesson you have learned from Dee?
I think I said it a little bit earlier, but not to be so close-minded and not to be so judgmental. She really taught me that, growing up and living in my little bubble, there's more to life than that. I mean, and even though I think she's had a pretty good childhood, but it was like those teenage years, it was just teaching me to be open-minded. I remember her saying to me several times, Mama, you're not perfect. You don't know everything. You don't even listen. That's the problem. You don't listen to nobody. And it took a while, but now I'm starting to listen to her and to be more open-minded to certain situations that I'm not familiar with, or certain situations that I'm like, there may could be a better way. So she just have taught me a lot about that. And I think it was more about, I didn't want to see some of the things that were hindering me hinder her. So I know that I had to change myself in order for her to see a different person so she could be a different person, if that makes sense. So, but yeah.
Awesome. Dee, what was the most valuable lesson your mom has taught you?
Ooh, this is a good one. I say like just being more responsible, like being on my own. I know I'll depend on her way. I probably depend on her way more now than what I did. She just taught me like I could do it, cause like she did it like by herself, really. Like raised me as a single parent. So I mean, I just like look at her as like inspiration. Like if my mom could do it, like with the kid, I know I can. Like I don't really have like any problems to worry about. So I say she just taught me like I can like really do anything because I know she did, and like she did it like way harder than I had. So yeah.
I'm gonna cry for real.
That's awesome. Awesome. That's all the questions that we have on Zoom and Facebook Live for right now. Maybe you ladies can keep on checking back to Facebook Live if anybody posts anything that watches it later and answer them there. I just want to say that I appreciate this so much. I appreciate getting both of your point of views. I know you both personally. You're an awesome mother-daughter duo. I have a 12-year-old myself, and I'm just starting to go through these things that LaNisha has been talking about. And so I really appreciate everything that you guys have talked about tonight. And I know that everyone else does as well. This has been awesome.
Thank you. I truly enjoyed it. So
I did too.
I slip you your money for coming through for me. I didn't have to twist her hand, but I'm glad. And I mean, if we're gonna end, I'm just gonna say I'm not a perfect mom. She was not a perfect daughter, but I think she helped me to grow, and vice versa. She says that I'm her inspiration, but I look at her and I'm like her and my son, and it's like I have to be better so they can be better. So they inspire me way more than they will ever know. So
Yes, I thought you ladies did awesome. Y'all are the cutest mother-daughter duo. I had truly enjoyed this conversation tonight. I felt like it was more of a conversation. And I hope that our viewers took some of the tips and can use them moving forward with conversations with their kids. DeAsia, I agree. I think, even thinking of me as a parent, just the line of work we work in, I feel like sometimes we know a little more sometimes. And so in our minds, we think that we are going to do certain things parenting wise. And, but even the most knowledgeable people in these areas are not perfect. And there's always places to grow and learn. It's always, a conversation. I mean, our technology's changing, our kids, things that they're going through are changing. Mental health is a big issue right now. We didn't really talk a lot about mental health at all, but I know, with COVID, mental health has has been a big strain on a lot of people, even us as adults. So even having those conversations around mental health and stress and anxiety and depression and things like that are important to talk about too during this time. So for anybody that is not following us on Facebook, follow the Children's Council and Counseling Services to follow along with our Take This Time to Talk campaign, because I'm sure Ashley and LaNisha are working on some more graphics and some more ideas for that. We are going to have a November Parent University. Matt Bellis is going to be our presenter, and he's going to be talking to us about supporting teens in reducing their stress and ours in the pursuit of success. So Tuesday, November 17th, 7 p.m. Via Zoom or Facebook Live will be our next one. And then we are planning to have one more in December, and we will probably wrap up with that one for the year. And we look forward to seeing you all in November. If anybody has any extra questions, comments for LaNisha, DeAsia, put them in our Facebook chat, and they will keep checking on that for us. I do not have anything else, ladies. I thought y'all did awesome. Is there anything y'all want to leave us with tonight before we wrap up?
I was just say thank you. I enjoyed it, and thanks for having us.
Yes, thank you. I enjoyed myself.
All right, ladies. Well, I look forward to hearing from you all soon.
All right. Thank you.
Bye, ladies. Awesome job.